Hello and welcome to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where we talk about leading remote teams, online collaboration, and working in distributed organizations. This podcast is brought to you by Virtual Not Distant, where we help managers and teams transition to an office-optional approach. Find out everything we do over at virtualnotdistant.com and check out our show notes and pictures of our lovely guests over on the podcast page. It's great to have you here, listeners. Let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to episode 222 of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast. Today we're covering online communities, those online spaces where people can connect regardless of where they're based, and where those working away from their team members or the rest of the organization can find places of support, and where freelancers can find a group of their peers. Dear listeners, if we haven't met before, my name is Pilar Orti and I'm the director of Virtual Not Distant. And if you're a regular listener, well, last week you will have found a different type of episode in your feed. And that show was hosted by Brie Cagliati from Shield Geo, as they have joined us on the show with a series on connection and disconnection in remote teams. And those episodes are going to be alternated with our regular episodes. So 1 week they'll have an episode, then 1 week we have either a Maya and myself or a multi-guest episode. So I know this is going against best podcast practice, which says stick to your format every week, but we're seeing how it works for us as podcasters, and we'd love to hear how it's working from you, our listeners. So let me remind you of our website, virtualnotdistant.com. We have a contact form there, or email me directly, Pilar, Pilar, at virtualnotdistant.com. So the plan is for seven episodes of the Connection and Disconnection. We've got one of their episodes, one multi-guest with myself as host, one connection episode, one show with Maya and myself. So we'll see how it works. We'd love to hear from you. Now, today is our monthly multi-guest episode hosted by myself. And in order of appearance, we have Lisette Sutherland talking about Virtual Team Talk, the community that she and I set up some time ago now, almost as far long ago as this podcast. Then Alex Hearst is talking about the community that's linked to the organization that he's founded. It's called Hoxby. We'll also hear from Mark Kilby talking about Agile Florida and more. And finally, Martin Gilbraith is going to tell us why he set up virtual meetups for members of the IAF, which is the International Association of Facilitators, England and Wales chapter. So interesting that an organization whose members have always traditionally met face-to-face is now adopting an online component. And I will also tell you about another community in the making for a niche within the remote work ecosystem. So this is an episode that goes quite well with the launch of the series on connection and disconnection, as many remote workers join these online communities when they want to connect with others outside of work, or when they can't find that connection around work for whatever reason, or because they don't want to, because they want something different to be connecting with people outside of work. And I know that as a concept, this is not new. We've had online forums for ages, Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups. But I think that the breadth and mainstream of these communities now has made them quite an important part of the remote work ecosystem. Dare I say the work ecosystem. Because consciously or not, it's supporting those individuals who can't or don't want to fulfill their social needs or development needs at work. So I think it's very interesting how these interest-based or social communities are supporting the world of remote work and the future of work. So I hope that you'll get a bit of an idea of the different types of online communities with different aims, with a mixture of people hooking up asynchronously, for example, mainly text-based, non-real-time, or meeting up online on video, or actually mixing the online with the co-located experience. And although I also know that this is like a tiny spot in the world of online communities, hopefully it will be of interest for those of you who are already in communities, to see what's happening elsewhere, or those of you thinking about joining them, those of you thinking of setting up one or already running one, and for those of you just generally interested in 21st century work life. So, before we start with our first guest, Lisette Sutherland, I want to refer to the last guest, Martin Gilbraith from the IAF, as I am co-hosting a meetup in London for that group on the 27th of February, 6 p.m. UK time, and it's going to be a hybrid meetup. So even if you're not in London, you can join online. And the title is Facilitating Hybrid Conversations. And I'm going to be running the session with Judy Rees, who you might remember from this podcast. And what I find interesting so far is that we've had more people signing up for the online spaces than in the room. So that's interesting in itself. We'll stick the link in the show notes. And what I mean by we is I mean Maya, who's doing the show notes, of course. So do join us. Right, let's move on. Let's move on to our first community, Virtual Team Talk, which Lisette Sutherland and I set up some time ago. And who's gathered here? Well, it's a group of people, a community of people who know that we can work together online. And many are trying to find the best ways of doing so. Some of us also advocate for remote work, as in saying, yes, it can be done, it's possible, it's got lots of benefits, but you do have to bear in mind certain things. And how do we gather? Well, we gather asynchronously, mainly in Slack. I would say it's a bit forum-like. So the Slack is divided into different channels so that small numbers of us can have focused conversations. For example, there's a channel on what's going on for quick updates about what people are up to. We have a learning channel. There's an advanced facilitation channel. There's a tools channel, of course. But there's also a jobs channel, and we even have an about writing channel. Guess who started that? And I actually started that because I was having lots of private conversations on Slack with Teresa Sigilito-Holima, and I knew there would be others in the group who might want to join us or who might want to just read over what we were talking about. So I set up that channel. And sometimes we do gather in real time to talk about it. So the context of virtual work or remote work brings the people together into the group, and that's the main focus, but then sometimes other stuff emerges. So let's see what Lisette thinks about that. So a reminder, Lisette Sutherland, Director of Collaboration Superpowers and author of Work Together Anywhere. So this story about all of us who are interested in virtual work, getting together, but actually then talking about a lot of other stuff. What does it remind you of?
I'll liken this back to a weird example. When I was in college, I used to have this band, the legendary Pink Dots, that I was just a huge fan of. And I would only go on vacation to places where the legendary Pink Dots were playing because I knew that when I went to the show, I would meet people that would be likable by me. Like I knew that if we had the legendary Pink Dots in common, there was something about this band. It's like the Grateful Dead in some ways, but there was something about this band where you knew if you met a fellow fan that would be somebody you could get along with. So I planned most of my vacations around these tours, and it was true. Like I stayed at people's houses, I hung out with fellow fans, and they were always people that, I maintained friendships with. So it's kind of the same.
Yes, that's a wonderful story. Very, very good off-the-cuff story.
I'm glad I remembered it.
Well, let's go back to the set of questions that we have. So do you remember why we started it?
Well, I'm curious to hear what you're going to say, but because my memory is notoriously bad, I've told you this before, and I have a weird way of remembering things, which is I remember how I feel about things, but I don't remember what exactly happened. So I really have to be careful and write things down when I feel strongly about something. But when I thought back to how we started the community, I think it started with the blab that we were running. Like you and I were doing a blab where we were inviting people onto the show. It was like a radio show where people could come online and talk about the topics that we were talking about. And we could people could go offline and then come back online. It was an awesome tool, actually. And we were meeting so many great people that we needed a place to continue the conversation. So we started Virtual Team Talk as sort of a way to gather all of these great people we were meeting in one place. That's how I remember it.
Yes, that was one part of it, because for listeners who might not remember or have ever came across Blab, it was like a Google Hangout, but people could jump on and be on camera randomly. And it was really interesting that we set up these sessions. And yeah, then random people would come on, or people we'd met on Twitter or whatever. And also, Lisette, your podcast collaboration, Superpowers, you were also meeting people through that. I'd started with this show. We were meeting lots of people on Twitter, and we thought, what a shame that we can't have them all in one place. And yes, that was exactly when we thought, okay, I think you said, well, why don't we start a Slack? And Slack was relatively new then. And that's what we did. We gathered everyone in this place to have them, I suppose, nearby, no?
Yeah, we're just like it was like friends where you're like, oh, I'd really like to hang out once in a while, but I don't want to have to call everybody individually and then schedule a time to hang out. And yeah, Slack seemed like the obvious choice at the time. And I think it is still.
So don't be fooled, people, by everyone who says, oh, we build this community for the greater good. Well, yes, a lot of the time, but sometimes there's a very, we were really fulfilling something we needed as people working away from our colleagues, away from our collaborators. We needed that. We needed a place where we could go, okay, we belong here. And in fact, especially at the beginning, we'd like to invite the people we want to be talking to here. And that is one of the wonderful things about the online space.
Yeah, it was like an online virtual party where you can just come and go as you please, is really how I see it now.
It's ongoing. So now, do you remember then, or do you have actually, let me go back to your preference. Do you have a feeling of how it's changed? Or do you remember feeling differently about it? I don't know. I think it was like 4 years ago or 5 that we set it up. Did you feel different about it to how you feel it then, for example, now?
I didn't. I guess in the way that it's changed it has been really an unfocused community. Like, I don't remember exactly in the beginning. I remember we were doing projects and you were organizing the internal conferences for people in the community. And I think some people were doing projects together. And I remember it as just being a place to talk. And I had all these grand plans. Like, I think we were going to grow the community, but not too fast, and just getting the right people in. So not everybody was invited. So I remember it being more project-based, and it sort of devolved into anything. There's no community manager who is directing the show, I would say. I mean, you, myself, and Mark were the admins, and we approve the people that come into the community just to make sure it doesn't get full of spam or random people. But other than that, there's no administration to this point. So I feel like it's gotten more unfocused over time in terms of like intentions and goals for the community.
Yes.
But
yes,
it's still it still sort of remains the same for me, the same function, which is a place to dip in and out of when I need help or when I want to collaborate. I need to talk to somebody about virtual teams, or I need input. But how has it changed for you? I'm curious, because yeah, I just remember it being different for you.
Yes, well, it's evolved, and thinking back, it's evolved in a way that makes sense with the context. And I think this is always something that is so interesting to see. So 4 or 5 years ago, there were lots of Facebook groups, there were LinkedIn groups, but there weren't many Slack places. So some people were already using it for work, maybe, but there were not many Slack places. And the difference is that Slack you have more ownership over it. Like when you're in a Facebook group, you are still in Facebook, and there's still a lot of stuff. So at the beginning, we were a small group, and actually a lot of the people in there we'd met individually. We had some sort of connection. You'd met quite a few people in person also. Everyone had connections. And for me at the beginning, I wanted to experiment more, like you're saying, and it was easier to experiment because the community had people's attention, because there weren't many others like it then. And the conversation around working virtually, online collaboration was very focused and within a very small number of people online, at least.
Right.
It's grown. The conversation has exploded. There are loads of communities now around online work, around any kind of work. Meeting people online is really common. Hanging out with people online is really common. Almost every meetup group now that meets in person probably has an online equivalent also.
Right.
And I think that's what's happened. And because we set it up for people to be in there, not to pursue a business goal or a very specific piece of advocacy, then it just means it belongs to the group now a lot more than when we started.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, in a way, I think, oh man, I should have taken it and shaped it into something. And there, looking back, if I look at my time commitments, I was already over. It's amazing that I was able to fit anything else
to open the Slack.
Yeah, well, yeah, and sometimes I don't because it's so overwhelming. There's like great conversations and there's all kinds of people who want to do projects or, hey, I've got this demo of a tool and I'm like, yeah, I want to do it. And then, very suddenly I've overcommitted. Yeah, it's lovely to see.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of impressed. One of the things I'm really impressed that it survives this long without any management. And some people I think most people won't know, but I've actually written a book about online community management in the past. It never got published, which is a long story, but it does exist. And it's all about how to grow online communities. So, I have all this experience growing, and I built like 45 online communities for other organizations, but I didn't do anything with virtual team talk. So it is sort of big, it's been like an untended garden. And I'm surprised at how focused it stays and how lovely the community is, even without anybody, like tending the garden really. You've done tending in the past, like you've taken lurkers and people that don't contribute at all and removed them from the community. And, I think every once in a while you seem to go in and like you clean up a bit. Is that?
Well, I tried to clean up, but the people didn't let me. There's a very interesting conversation. Yeah, because I had this conversation. I wanted to clean up and I don't think I did in the end. Or maybe, yeah, I don't think so, because I asked, should we be doing this? And a lot of people said, well, there's no need. So that's also a very interesting thing that happens is that these memberships, in a way, in inverted commas, these memberships expire and nobody knows. So I think one of the things with online communities is that sometimes you really don't know who's around.
Yeah.
Because some people will not have logged in for ages and stuff like that. I think a well-curated community probably for me needs removing people, but it's whether you want, for me, it wasn't worth it. And it's like, well, if no one minds, okay, I will learn not to mind also.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I think also because we did quite a lot of projects when we formed the community, and we did a couple of internal affairs. So a lot of us saw each other in real time on video. I think that those relationships are still there, a lot of them. So there is still that kind of caring every now and then, and people are still having conversations. And sometimes you see people join and someone else says, oh, hello, they've met somewhere else. And I think while we're still bringing in people who have relationships with other people is from somewhere else, I think it will stay quite nice and tame.
I agree. And actually, I like it. I have joined other remote working Slack communities, and there's like 24,000 people in them, hundreds of channels. And for me, it's just too much. I like that this community is smaller and, not as active in that way. For me personally, I don't need a super busy community with tons and tons and tons of people. Like what I wanted was just a small group of well-curated people that are interested. And yeah, people will come and go, but still there's always a core that seems to remain in virtual team talk, where if I have a question or something I want to work through, you can dip in and out as needed.
And well curated for listeners, all it means is that you have to answer 3 questions to join.
Indeed, but it is amazing how many people that filters out.
Yes, it does. I think that there was a sense someone once said, oh, why can anyone invite people in? And we said, well, actually, that's the one thing we're going to hang on to. We're not going to dictate who comes in or out. We're not going to curate anything. We're not going to community manage, as you say, but we want people to at least have to answer 3 questions before they come in. Because like you say, otherwise, if you can't be bothered to do that, we don't want you, to be honest.
Right. And it really does filter out a lot of spam.
Yeah, it does.
A surprising amount of spam. Yeah, there are some people where we think like, huh? Like they're not that serious, or they don't answer the questions. Like, sorry, that's the only rule we have. So you got to at least do that. Yeah. And they're pretty basic.
Yes, they are. They're very basic. So some of the things that have worked well and some which didn't that we tried out, Lisette, can you remember? I mean, like you say, not that many recently, maybe, but any memories from the last 5 years on Virtual Team Talk?
I think your first internal conference, the internal affair, was a huge success. I thought that was amazing. The second one was also good, but it seemed like that one was more disappointing, I think, because less people got involved.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, I remember you being disappointed. I remember how you felt about it, but I don't exactly remember how. I remember you being disappointed. But the first one was, I think, a big success and extremely motivating because it was just like, wow, look at all the things that we can do online. Like, this is amazing. So I remember that as a success. I remember we did virtual co-working for years.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that was a success for a short time. And then it fizzled a bit because there wasn't somebody spearheading like, okay, let's do this. And so as I got busier and also was on the road a lot over the last couple of years, my ability to actually log in consistently and virtual co-work with others went down. And once you and I were not spearheading that anymore, then it kind of lost steam. So that was a success and failure, I would say.
Yeah. And I think hearing you talk about it and thinking back, I think it's got to do again with where we are. So when we started the community and during the first couple of years, technology, what affordable technology was allowing us to do was amazing. But now we've done all that. Been there, done that, it's not exciting anymore. And like you say, the first internal affair was like, wow, we can meet with all these people. Some of us were online for 12 hours. I'd never done that before. I'd never even been to a conference where I'd been for 12 hours, let alone online from my lounge with people. So there was a real, like, excitement, like a real excitement. And now I think the excitement has really calmed down because it's quite difficult to get people really excited in virtual team talk because we've all experimented with so many different things, not just technology.
Right.
So it's different. I find it different. Yeah.
That's a good way to put it, actually, because in the beginning it was like, holy moly, we can do Blab like a radio show. We can do Sococo like a virtual co-working group. I mean, all of these things were brand new. And so there was like this huge enthusiasm. And then I think everybody's also, everybody's busy. So
yeah, and a lot of people, and it's happened to me as well, started to experience a lot of that at work.
Right.
I've started to collaborate more online in these different ways than when I first met you, for example. So a lot of that, sometimes I get some of what I used to get in virtual team talk, I get with clients because now I'm able to talk to them in that way also. And in that, so I think it's just it's fascinating. We should write a book.
Oh my God, hashtag never again. Never again. Although I would have to say, Pilar, if you ever wanted to write a book together, I would not be able to say no to you. So
you heard it, listeners.
I mean, come
hashtag
on.
Lisette said on the podcast.
Oh my God, never again's quickly turned into, except for if it's Pilar. But come on, some things are, it's going to be good. But I mean, I don't know if this is a good point or not, but I remember when you were saying like you get a lot of your social needs from other places now, I was feeling exactly the same thing because being on the road, like my speaking engagements and my number of workshops has increased. Like I'm also spending a lot more time in the 3D world. Like I've decided to focus more on like being 3D with people, like me going out and meeting people in person. So I've got all these activities that get me out of the house. And with all of that, like I'm actually an introvert. I'm an ambivert, if people know that. So I still like I'm getting all this weird social contact now and I really need to hole up because of that. And the last thing I want to do is like my precious alone time at home is then go into a virtual co-working community and talk even more with people. It's like, yeah, I had the same. I don't need that social interaction right now. That might change, of course, but at the moment, there's no need for it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's also why people dip in and out, why we have peaks of activity in virtual team talk. It's really interesting. Something that I quite like that I'm hanging on to is now having conversations that are not about virtual work or online collaboration. So now that there's quite a really nice group of people, I've made lots of friends in there. Like, and I'm talking proper, I mean, like you, Lisette, proper friends. And we have, for example, we have a channel about writing, and we talk a little bit there. Not many of us meet in real time, but we do. And I know it's a place, like, if I ever want to find people to talk about a certain thing, I'll probably find them in there. There's enough diversity. People who are in there are curious. They're usually doing more than one thing. So it's an interesting, I think, thinking back to why we set it up, I think it still fulfills very similar need.
I think so too. And I think it goes to show that there's clearly value there because it has survived without any real management. It just flourishes on its own, which I think is pretty special. And I like that it's not big and massive like some of the other digital nomad and remote work communities. Like, it's just too big for what I need. It's just too many conversations.
Yeah. Good. So, listeners, if you are in Virtual Team Talk, thank you very much.
Yeah, please stay in touch.
Stay in touch. Let us know. Say hello. And do bring those. Usually people bring like a handful of people in because it's really like, oh, you should join, but maybe you don't. It's starting, even though we can't say exactly what it does, but actually people have a sense of who might be a good fit or not. So if you haven't joined us, who should join us then, Lisette?
Well, I would say people interested in talking about virtual teams or remote work, or if you're a tool vendor and you're looking for people to beta your tool, or, it's a great place to go. There's always people in there looking for new tools. I mean, this is the place, I think, for people who are looking for technology and ways to experiment, because I would say that this is a group that is pushing the boundaries of what's possible and experimenting with what's possible. I mean, that's what I see in that group. It's like, how can we make this online conference work for, 3,000 people? Like, what tools would we need for, that kind of thing? And you're just like, whoa, like, do you even dare to do that? And this is the kind of group where people dare to do that.
Yeah, and what tools and also what behaviors. You hear a lot, okay, how should I do that? I've got that and that, but now how, what am I asking people to do around it? And how shall I operate? And I think just also people who maybe haven't found a community yet because they want something smaller, or actually people who maybe you don't even want to talk about that, but you are working away from your colleagues, and it's another place where you might find people again to talk about other stuff. So mainly we do talk about online collaboration and using the online space, but other times it's interesting conversations, because actually a lot of the conversations now also are about human interactions.
Right.
They just happen to be online. So every now and then there's also like the psychology stuff comes in, which is pretty interesting. So
yeah. And then we've got a new, I think the newest channel is the cats channel. So there's a whole bunch of cat lovers, a cat lover channel. So if you just need pictures of really cute cats every once in a while, we also have that.
But it's the new one. Isn't that interesting? It wasn't the first one.
Yeah. I don't know. I wasn't thinking about cats at the time, but I sure am glad that it started, because it's pretty fun.
It was missing.
It was missing. So somebody created it, which I really like.
And that's another thing, is if something's missing, someone can create a channel and just make the space there. And see, sometimes channels die a horrible death, but sometimes they really take off. So, and they take off for a while and then disappear. It's really interesting.
I think like a normal community, right?
Yes.
Like it just sort of grows, it shrinks and expands in proportion to what's needed. And it's organic.
Well, thank you, Lisette, for coming back onto the podcast to look back and reminisce over the last 4 years since we set up Virtual Team Talk. And those listeners who've been with us for more than 2 years, hello Andrew, hello Bart, hello many others, you will remember that Lisette used to be a co-host here every other week, and she does still host her own podcast collaboration, Superpowers. And of course, do grab her book, Work Together Anywhere. And also you might be interested in checking out episode 73 of 21st Century Work Life, where we talk about online co-working, which we have now dropped, but it's still worth listening to. Now, one of the things Lisette mentioned was the very loose aim we had when we set up Virtual Team Talk and how there's not really one person driving it. It's very organic and it really exists as long as the people in it wanting to exist. And what happens there really depends on those who decide to be active in it. So I know I want to share with you an example of something completely different, a community with a strong purpose and officially animated, officially driven. So luckily, through the podcast contributor form, did you know we have one? If you want to take part, fill it in. Through that form, I was introduced to Alex Hearst, who is a co-founder of Hoxby. And Hoxby is a purpose-led organization aiming to create a world of work without bias. So small aims there, so really changing the world of work. They are an agency, they tackle marketing, admin projects, HR projects, etc. And what's interesting about Hoxby is that instead of just being a platform for talent, like a pool of people who want to work freelance, they're actually building that community of freelancers. So let's hear why and how.
We're able to pull together teams across the world who work together in an asynchronous manner. And they are able to provide a kind of collective effort that also is multilingual, multicultural, can be local to a specific market or environment. So in the case of marketing, that's incredibly valuable to brands because we're able to have a single team that is working both globally from a kind of centralized strategy perspective, but also locally using local expertise, local understanding, local language. So Hoxby is, we talk about it as a community of people. We've got just over 1,000 people across 30 countries around the world. They come to us because they believe in the future of work that we believe in, which is that people should have a work style of their own choosing and not be made to work to a particular time schedule nor to a particular location. So, which is really great for and most exciting for people who want to work in a non-typical manner. So whether that is because of they might have a clinical diagnosis of something that means that working from a fixed location or to a fixed time schedule is difficult. It might be because their personal circumstances make that difficult. It might be that, for instance, they're a parent or caring for an elderly relative, that sort of thing. Those people who we call a kind of atypical worker are the people who are mostly coming to Hoxby and hearing about Hoxby because of the mission that we're on to create more work for those people.
Do they join a community or are they joining a work pool, or is there a crossover with those?
There's crossover. I mean, we talk about it as a community. In terms of our ability to deliver work for clients, obviously the strength of our community is really where the value is for them. But when we deliver projects, what we're doing is curating teams from that community who are best suited to deliver the work. So there isn't necessarily ongoing perpetual work for members of the community, but it's a big part of what the community is there to do. But there's other aspects to it as well. So there's we talk about the fact that there is work to be done, but there's also a social network that exists within the community. There's a support network. So there's the opportunity to be a part of something bigger, I think, which is what a lot of Hoxby's come to do. So they are freelancers who are coming together to be part of something bigger than themselves and to have social events, to peer-to-peer support, kind of an increasing range of services that we're able to offer as we increase in number and in scale.
What are some of the things then that happen when I join, or that I could expect, or that I'd look forward to being part of the community?
I should say that one of the principal benefits is that the whole community benefits from a profit share. So there is an opportunity to earn from the outset. So that's regardless of the amount of paid work that you do, you're part of a profit share. So that's the kind of first thing. You could benefit from getting discounted accountancy support from the finance people within the community. You could benefit from co-working events. So we have meetups throughout the year in locations wherever there are Hoxbys. We also put on events whereby we get Hoxbys together to meet, to network, to collaborate on things and to learn, as well as being part of an online group in Slack where we provide things like support for holistic well-being support. So we have a well-being program whereby we will do virtual yoga classes, virtual meditations, group conversations, informal chats, things like that, which we are building out into a kind of a broader service around hopefully supporting and improving mental health over the course of this year.
And how do you, I don't know if you personally or someone else in the business, how do you keep that community vibrant or like something's happening and keeping people interested beyond the economic and work-related benefits?
Yeah, I think that's where purpose comes in, really. And I think purpose is a really important thing for organizations to have if they're going to embrace a remote first way of working. It's really important to the culture. So our purpose is around creating a happier, more fulfilled society and creating a world of work without bias. That's the thing that bonds our Hoxbys, as we call them, together into a group. So we have, for instance, within the Slack environment, we have conversations around each of the atypical worker groups that we represent. So it might be that we're talking about people with an autism diagnosis, or people who are parenting, or people who are caring, and we'll support each other as subgroups within the community, talk about things, talk about work in the context of those scenarios. And I think people really benefit from having access to other people to talk about those things. There's a real openness, a real candor, and a real desire to bring about change through those conversations as well, which I think is a really, really powerful and important part of the culture that we're building at Hoxby. We do also have other things like a kind of water cooler space where people can talk freely about anything and everything, and things that they're coming across, and informal fun conversations, as well as conversations that are around interest. So we'll have different groups talking about things that they're interested in, and that serves to build more of a sense of a connected community than simply a work platform. So we saw a number of years ago, freelance platforms were in growth and still doing well. For the most part, they provide access to a freelance pool, and typically 3 to 4% of that freelance pool will find work at any given time. They're what I would call an intermediary. We think we're the thing that comes next, actually, which is a connected community of people who are working together to create work and to create work for each other. And we're seeing that the percentage is much higher for Hoxby members. It's more like 30 to 40% of the community in paid work at any given time.
The stuff that happens there, which is enabling this, because I imagine that the connections that are happening within the community, also if you're getting people to work together sometimes for clients, that's going to help. And also it's much nicer to be in a group of people where maybe the work doesn't come to you, but it comes to your friend. So it's a really nice thing to be happening.
Yes, absolutely.
Around the Slack conversations in particular, so the asynchronous, and I'll ask you about some of the events in a second, around the asynchronous, is this something that you and the people behind Hoxby do? How much do you curate, animate, steer, try to guide those conversations?
Yes, so we have what we call the sort of core team, I suppose, at Hoxby, and they're the Hoxbys who are working on Hoxby, and so they will be communicating regularly within the Slack environment to the broader community about the things that are happening within the organization. So whether those are improvements that we're making, or whether it's work we're doing for the clients, or whether it's progress we're making in spreading the word of work style, or whether it's promoting an event that we've got going on, there is a degree of Hoxby leading the conversation, stimulating the conversation, and inspiring the wider community behind what we're doing. And we have sort of different channels whereby that's more prevalent than in others. So we have a space, more of a kind of dedicated space for that sort of thing, that's kind of away from the more informal conversations. I think the other thing to say is that work style and the idea that people can work anywhere at any time is sacrosanct at Hoxby. So asynchronous working becomes the norm as a result, and the expectation. So everybody's very comfortable with the fact that someone will be consuming information and responding to their own schedule, so at their own time, and there isn't an expectation for kind of synchronicity in the way that those conversations happen either. So a lot of our content that we put out doesn't require synchronous working. So it'll be A piece of video, for instance, is a very common way of us kind of putting out a piece of content and inviting conversation as and when people are able to access it.
Mm. And you mentioned before you have events. One, maybe if I understood correctly, is some that are organized by Hoxby, but some that are meetups, maybe more organized locally.
Yes, that's right. So Hoxby's will very often set up their own meetup. So they will simply say to their kind of local subgroup, let's meet here, set a location and get together. And we will kind of help them publicize that. But we will also do events that we stage ourselves, where we bring together a large number of Hoxbys into the same space for the benefit of meeting each other in person and in-person learning and sociability, I think, as much as anything. We'll kind of have an annual set piece, but we'll also have some more low-key events over the course of the year.
And what might those lower keys? Are they specific to? Are they specific to skills? Are they specific to networking? Are they specific to? I don't know. What else? What else happens in some of those events?
We might just organise a social event, something whereby people can get together purely for the benefit of socialisation and getting to meet each other. Where there is a populace and a good number of Hoxbys, that might be something that we would do. We might want to organise a meetup around a theme. So we might want to get people who are particularly passionate about a conversation together to talk across the table about it, or in the same physical space to kind of brainstorm and come up with new ideas, that sort of thing. Only really where it's advantageous to be in the same space versus being able to do things remotely, because obviously our preference is to do everything remotely where possible. So, and I think the same is true with the work we do with clients. We're very much a kind of operations are remote and globally distributed. If it is beneficial and advantageous to meet in person, we'll do that, and we'll hire a room or an office space where it serves its purpose, but not because it's an expectation.
Ah, nice. So we have a whole range of people listening to the show, and who might be interested? You've said freelancers, so would it be freelancers looking for work? Who else might be interested in joining you?
Freelancing and self-employment generally. I think there's different types of people, different people looking for different things. If you're somebody who's looking to work freelance because you want flexibility over how you do your work, then Hoxby is very much a place to consider, because that's what we're there to offer. If you're a freelancer who's looking to do more kind of long-term contract work, we're probably not that kind of place, not that sort of provider, I suppose. Mm-hmm. I think we're also suitable for anybody who is considering changing the way that they're working currently. So if you're thinking that I'm in if you're feeling like the traditional work system isn't working for you and you're in employment and looking to make a transition into self-employment, then Hoxby's a good place to be, because we can be part of your portfolio of clients and of places where you earn a living.
And so what do people need to do to join you?
So apply. We've got an application process at hoxby.com. We have applications 4 times a year. We have application windows. So we have one in January and the next one in April. And so once a quarter, basically. That window is open for a month. So until the end of January or the end of April. Through that application process, what we're looking for is for people to demonstrate a connection to what we call the work style movement. So a connection to why they want to work in a different way and be the kind of person in charge of their own schedule. And that's the main thing that we're looking for. And then beyond that, assuming that they are successful, they only have to answer one killer question to apply. Then there's just a process of onboarding to go through, which is about ensuring that they have the right level of insurance and that they are kind of contractually compliant and all that sort of stuff. And then the fun stuff around becoming a fully fledged Hoxby and being entitled to the profit share. That kind of concludes the onboarding, and then they're kind of ready to receive paid work and be part of the community fun.
So there you have it. If you are a freelancer and want to work remotely, go to hoxby.com, and thank you very much to Alex Hearst for dropping by in the show. Now, listeners, I didn't pick up on it when Alex was mentioning it, but I thought it was really interesting that the asynchronous element of communication, which plays such a crucial part in how their freelancers work together, that element is also embedded in how they talk to each other socially. So I found that interesting, mirroring this, how they communicate socially with how they would be working together. So that community is quite established and it's very specific. It's not just for freelancers, but for freelancers who see work life in a certain way and who share a certain set of values. And this niching down of communities is something that we're starting to see online, I suppose offline also. But I want to introduce you to an emerging community, so Telecommuters Talk, which I came across on Twitter. And I think we've actually mentioned it before on this show. And it's aimed at working parents who are working remotely. So I asked Victoria, who's the person behind the community and the website, I asked her why she's working on setting this up. And this is what she said. So I'll read from her message. She said, I've been working remotely on and off since 2000. Every time I went back to an office, it was due to isolation. Even for me, as an introvert, it was too much. 4 years ago, I finally started writing about it and talking and researching about challenges of remote work with other remote friends, colleagues, and I was definitely not alone. Like others, I tried hard to find the connections at school and other local avenues, but there was no common ground. The closest I came was walking with other working parents after drop-off. My entire day felt so different after a pleasant walk and talk with a friend. No additional apps to use, just plain old face-to-face conversations. The impact of these walks was amazing, and after researching it, it all added up. Connections are needed. I figured it would be beneficial to share this basic yet powerful concept with others. The goal is for us to connect globally and locally. Since working parents may not have the bandwidth to attend local meetup events, our community would first connect them online at a time that works for them, via book clubs, accountability sessions, etc. Then give them the ability to take it a step further by connecting with folks that live close to them and go for a walk or coffee, but mainly finding their tribe. The main objective is to find a way to address the isolation and all the challenges that come with one single word: isolation. Telecommuters Talk community is a small group of individuals that want to connect at a deeper level. A private group where you can discuss your challenges, solutions, and aspirations. All online and available to you when you have the time. So they have monthly newsletter focused on solutions for remote work, monthly Zoom sessions to connect face-to-face, where we discuss isolation, productivity, parenting, quarterly book clubs meetings to discuss books like The Year Without Pants, read it, and Essentialism, the Disciplined Pursuit of Less, read it too and really enjoyed it, funnily enough. The ability to connect online with local team members, an accountability partner where two members set goals for 6 months and hold each other accountable. So you can join that community, listeners, at telecommuterstalk.com/community. We'll put the link in the show notes, and they also have a free ebook that you can download. So thank you, Victoria. Thank you for letting us into why you set up the community. I think it's fascinating to always know why these things are set up. So let's find out about other online communities. Our next guest, who you might remember from our episode on onboarding or integration, which is the word he uses, and many other episodes. Our next guest is Mark Kilby. He's an Agile coach consulting with many organizations, and he's also the co-author of From Chaos to Successful Distributed Teams. And he is heavily involved in quite a few online communities, and he's the third admin of Virtual Team Talk too. So I asked him, I said, Mark, what kind of communities are you a part of, and why are you a part of them?
I like the why question. So I have failed many times at building online communities since the mid-90s to get to the point where now I succeed at building. So I know a lot of things not to do. That's a much longer podcast, which we'll try to avoid that one for now. So we'll talk about what you should do. So some of the groups I belong to now, I'm based here in Florida. I started the Agile Orlando community for people practicing Agile project management techniques. But we quickly discovered other groups in the state of Florida that were growing up along with our group. And so we reached out to them. I was the one crazy enough that I would road trip to other cities to get to meet these people and do talks in other parts of Florida. And if you've not been to Florida, it is a good-sized state. It takes several hours to go from one end of Florida to the other if you try to go the whole length of the state. But I felt this need to connect to these other groups and find out, what are you doing? What's successful for you, and what can we share? So there's talks I did for them on not only topics related to Agile, but how we were organized within our group. That ended up becoming the Agile Florida community. And that community is not only the group, the user groups within the state, it's also an online community. It's a Slack community, which has a few hundred people in it now, mostly in the state of Florida, but also some outside who occasionally come to Florida and are interested in interacting with the groups. Maybe it's speakers, maybe it's just people that happen to travel here for work at certain times. And it's a very active community online as well. And that has also spawned an annual conference.
Well, how do people join then that community, which, as I understand, is an online community, but it has a very strong co-located component with a conference, I imagine.
Right.
So how do people join it, and what happens when they join?
So most people are attending some of the local meetups, the local Agile meetups in Orlando or Tampa or Miami, Jacksonville now we have. There's other groups starting to pop up. But they attend these local groups, and they like what they hear. They like the speakers. They like the activities. They get excited, and they want to know more. Great. There's that opportunity to invite. So providing them an invitation to say, hey, if you've got more questions, how would you like to talk to people who talk about this all the time across the state of Florida? So not just your city, but you get to connect with people all over our area and find out who else has questions like this or who has answers. So as part of that, there's a page on our Agile Florida site where they can very easily sign up. And then as soon as they come in, we have several administrators that initially were greeters. So, I know you and I did something very similar on Virtual Team Talk, where as soon as somebody comes in, you say hello, welcome, glad you're here. So it's letting them know, hey, we're really happy you're here, and tell us a little bit about you and what brought you here, so we can maybe direct you to the right places. So with that, we get them connected with their local community. So there's several local channels in the Agile Florida Slack. There's certain topics. So some want to know about product management, some want to know about coaching. And so there's different channels they can plug into. And of course, being the local connection, people also want to know about jobs, and they want to know about training. And so there's channels for that. And so we try to direct them. And I started out saying the administrators used to do this, but as members that have been there for a while started to see what the administrators were doing, they started mimicking the behavior. So as soon as somebody new would come in, they'd go, oh, hey, welcome. And sometimes they had met them at this local meetup. Oh, yeah, we met the other night at this meetup. So glad you made it here. And I know you had questions. Let me direct you to this channel. So you'd have other people now taking on that Sherpa role, that somebody coming in and helping guide that person. What kind of information, or who do you want to connect with? So having that just community member feel immediately connected, both locally and online, is very powerful. And then that kind of carries on into the conference as well. But I didn't know if you still want to talk about the online community first.
So what I really liked about that is that sense that people know who's turning up. Not everyone, but some people. And also I like that sense of, I know you had questions around this, you probably want to talk to. So
Exactly.
so that's quite important is that sense that someone already knows who you are, and also that the people already within the community have that sense that they know the people coming in. Because I think, I mean, sometimes it's important, sometimes not. So what was this something, I don't know, what do you think about that?
It depends on what's the intent of the online community. So for Agile Florida, it's really connecting people who are trying to apply Agile techniques. Some of us might have been doing it for a long time. Some of us might say we have expertise. Some of us might say we're still learning after a long time. It just depends on the situation. But letting people know that they are welcome to ask questions, and it's a very, very much a helping community. Contrast that with what we have on Virtual Team Talk, which it's a learning community, but it's also a bit of an exploration community. At least that's how I look at it. So sometimes we're bringing in people from very different industries, different experiences, and I love that about this community because I'll learn something completely new about psychology or something new about the environmental movement. I mean, we have a very diverse group there on Virtual Team Talk, and it's not all about just remote work, which a lot of Slack communities you go to, it's all about the remote work. But I think it's being very clear on what's the intent of the community, and do people experience that as soon as they enter. And so that's where Agile Florida, it's all about what do you want to learn or share about Agile. With Virtual Team Talk, it's what do we want to explore about working online and working with very diverse groups. At least that's how I interpret it.
Yeah, and I wonder sometimes whether we in Virtual Team Talk, maybe that's something that we could be more explicit about. Because a lot of the time I think people, and you're right, and people join in because they find the community on Google, which I never know how they do that. Because one person has said, you must join this because they've heard something on a podcast or read a blog or whatever, or LinkedIn. And I think maybe even that is such a good piece of integration or onboarding to say, well, welcome and everything, and just to remind you or just to make sure that your expectations are met, this is kind of why we're here now. Because that's another thing. I mean, the communities probably evolve a lot.
Yeah, and it'll change over time. So let me, as an example of that, let me flip back to Agile Florida. So in the very early days of Agile Florida, the conference actually came a few months before the Slack community. So the conference came about because people wanted to get together. They wanted to share their experience about Agile. It's like, okay, great, let's do that. And so we organized our first conference, and it was about 100 people. This year was our 6th year. We had about I think we were close to 250 people. So it's been steadily growing. But as part of that, how we've interacted in Slack has also changed. So I mentioned to you before we started the podcast about integrating new volunteers in. And so the organization and planning of that conference is all online because we're all in different cities. We're all part of different user groups. And so as people find out about the community, we get people always volunteering and saying, I'd love to help with this conference. I'd love to help with this community. And we go, great. So we bring them into a special volunteer channel, private channel. So, it seems a little exclusive. So that's the cool factor. You're with the cool kids now. But letting them know, hey, here's what it means to be a volunteer. So now your focus is a little bit different. And you still might be interested in learning, but you might be interested in connecting with people who lead some of the communities. You'll definitely have that interaction. But we also try to find out from the volunteers, what is it that you're hoping to get out of volunteering? And so maybe they want to practice some facilitation. Maybe they want to just help organize venues. Maybe they want to help host special speakers and just to meet those speakers. So we try, not always successful, but we try to find out what is it that brought that person to really take that extra step to volunteer, and can we help them find a match in their volunteer work with the conference in particular to help build those extra connections. Now, also the local user groups have their own organization. I can't speak to all of them. Mm-hmm. I can only speak to Agile Orlando, but we have sort of a similar process in Agile Orlando where there's a special channel where people who are organizing events are brought in, and we try to find out what is it that was interesting to you about volunteering, and how can we find a place for you that fulfills the need of the group, but also fulfills your need to become a volunteer. So that finding out the purpose of the org and the purpose of the individual and trying to get that match is part of that integration process, even with a volunteer group like that.
I love that community has many layers. So it has like you're saying, it's got the learning and the anyone can join, and we're just here really to learn and maybe meet a few people and continue some conversations with some people we already know. Then it also has these volunteers who come and actually then are part of that conference. And then, of course, you have the shared experience of the conference, of the co-located conference. Do you integrate in any way during the conference? Do you do anything to integrate the people who cannot make it to the conference, or basically, or not?
So, as you know from some of my experiments with hybrid meetings, that is very tricky to do, yes, especially with large groups. But what we try to do is, for people who can't make it to the conference, what can we bring back for them? So maybe they were interested in certain sessions at the conference or certain conversations. So as part of that, so that particular conference runs using the open space technology format. So in that format, there's no agenda necessarily planned ahead of time. The participants plan the agenda the morning of. It's actually extremely quick, and because of the energy of the community, it's amazing the diversity of topics and conversations that happen in that. I'm really amazed at the quality of the conversations every year. But not everyone can make those conversations, and we had talked about, do we provide a remote connection? The logistics of that, especially something that's so dynamic and moves around a lot within the conference space, would be challenging. So what we do try to do is make sure there's lots of pictures, there's lots of notes. Some people do capture a little bit of video as well, and we try to make that available to everybody who couldn't make the conference. It's like, okay, here's the information, and oh, by the way, it seems like this session might get repeated at this user group at this time. This session might get repeated at this. So some of the sessions kind of migrate out to some of the individual user groups, and we try to let people know about that. So they can't catch the whole conference, but they might see, a repeat performance, so to speak, of some of the sessions.
That is a very thoughtful use of technology. I think that for me, that sounds much better than trying to either get people to come in a setup where it's not going to be ideal, or just trying to record everything for those people who can't make it. I think this is a much more thoughtful approach and a much better experience for the person who couldn't make it, probably.
Yes. Mm-hmm. We hope so.
Yes, it sounds like it. It really does, and I think I'm going to share this with a community that also meets online and in person that I'm a part of. I think it sounds really good. So, anything else that you want to say about online communities? What you've got from them? What you've got from being a very active part in some of them, and I imagine that you're not, well, I hope, just for your sanity, that you're not an extremely active part of all the online communities you're part of, but maybe I'm wrong.
Not all of them, no. I have my moments. So when I'm involved in starting one, yes, I'm extremely active. But I have eventually learned that I have to allow others to step in. And so when somebody says, I'd like to help, oh, they're my best friend. And then we talk about possibilities. But I try not to dump task on them. I try to find out what is it that's exciting for you, so we can find that, because if you don't have that passion, it's going to be hard for that person to sustain their part of the community. So, but you mentioned the layers to the Agile Florida community. Well, there's sort of another layer we hadn't talked about yet. So there's an international organization called the Agile Alliance, which supports many different activities. Well, once Agile Florida and the Slack community got running, we actually did a presentation at their annual conference, which is usually around 2,500 people at that conference. But we did a presentation talking about how we built our community this way, and some of the leaders of that group came to us and said, "Do you think you could do that for the Agile Alliance?" So we did. So there's now another group that is specifically for Agile user group leaders, where they can share information. And this is a very different community, though. So it's sort of another layer. It connects a worldwide group of leaders who have volunteered to start their own local meetups, but some are just starting. They've never done anything like that, and they need help. They need advice. Or maybe it's a group that's struggling, and they're looking for suggestions on, okay, what can I do with my group? There's now a community for them to go to and get that help. So we've been running that community for about 3 years. I have a co-director, and we're getting some volunteers set up so I can maybe not be so involved in the day-to-day. But now Agile Florida has been kind of running on its own with some great leadership. So I've been able to step away from that one and put more effort in the Agile Alliance community group support community to get that going, because I appreciate community. I appreciate people sharing and helping each other out.
Thank you, Mark Kilby, for appearing on our show once again. And listeners, Mark's website is markkilby.com, and check out his book, From Chaos to Successful Distributed Teams, co-authored with Johanna Rothman. We'll stick the links in the show notes about what Mark was referring to, but if you're part of the Agile community, check out agileflorida.com. And if you're looking for an Agile user group, look for the Agile Alliance Community Group Support. We'll put the link in the show notes. And there, Mark and friends will help you find the right group, or they might help you start your own. You never know. Right, for our final guest, something a little bit different. This time we're going to hear about an organization, a membership organization, that has introduced online gatherings to supplement the co-located ones. So not an asynchronous space, but a very synchronous one. And for that, I thought I'd bring in Martin Gilbraith, who is a certified professional facilitator, and he is the chair of IAF England Wales, where he's introduced these virtual meetups. He'll tell us all about that in a moment, but before that, I just wanted to clarify what we mean here about facilitators, because it's such a niche profession. So, in effect, a facilitator is someone who leads a group through a process, mainly to get to an outcome by facilitating the conversation, by helping people talk through dialogue and come to whatever they need to come to, agreements, plans, etc. So a lot of managers will use facilitation at some point in their meetings. A lot of us might use it, especially working with groups and teams. Many trainers use facilitation when they run workshops. So, for example, I do it a lot when you try to extract the content from the people in the room rather than telling them about stuff. And facilitators are usually involved in meetings, strategic planning, away days. And this is an area that Virtual Not Distant is going to move more into, the facilitation of strategic and away days for remote teams. So watch this space. But if you want to find out more about the profession, so as I said, there are people who just do this as their main profession. Well, we have a podcast for that. And by we, I mean the IAF England and Wales chapter. It's called Facilitation Stories. It's quite a new show, and it's all about facilitation and being a facilitator. So if you're interested, Facilitation Stories. For now, though, let's hear from Martin Gilbraith. Okay, so Martin, I suppose the first thing, just to put into context what we're going to be talking about, is tell us a little bit about what the International Association of Facilitators England and Wales chapter is.
IF, the International Association of Facilitators, is exactly what it sounds like. It's an international association of facilitators. It's got about 1,800 members in about 60 countries, I think. And among those are about 40 national and local chapters or local groups of members. So IF England and Wales is one of those, essentially a subgroup of the membership of IF in England and Wales.
And what does the chapter do? Why are we divided into chapters?
Really to encourage and enable members to connect and collaborate with each other locally, and to enable members to build a greater sense of community among themselves. IF is about connecting facilitators, promoting facilitation and advancing facilitation practice and facilitation standards. And at least in England and Wales, our approach has been that the best way to do that is to bring facilitators together so they get to know each other and get to like and trust each other and get enthused and inspired to find ways to collaborate together.
And so this happens mainly at the moment in co-located events, doesn't it? Tell us a bit about those meetups, which are great fun, having attended some.
That's right. We started offering face-to-face meetups about 5 or 6 years ago, I think, first in London, and then they grew all around England and Wales and beyond as well. And the emphasis has generally been on making them low-key and informal, welcoming and inclusive, primarily to give people a chance to meet and to get to know each other. And so some of the meetups are literally just a coffee meetup. People meet and drink coffee together and talk about anything they like. And they're often quite small and local, and they're all over the country. But then we also have some more substantial meetups, usually 3 or 4 hours in an afternoon, where people actually do facilitation together. So they demonstrate, they practice, they experiment with facilitation together. And the idea of those is that, firstly, of course, we get the chance to learn from doing with each other rather than just talking. But also it's a bit more worth people's while to travel a bit further because it's a bit more substantial.
And a bit longer also.
And a bit longer.
Yeah. So you've got this big selection of co-located events. So we have breakfast, then there's some evening drinks, and then there are some learning-focused events, sometimes 4 hours, 2 hours. And then we've got the conference in Birmingham once a year.
That's right.
So where do the virtual meetups come into it, and why? Because I think it was you who started them. Is that right?
Yeah. So I quite deliberately did not choose to do any virtual meetups early on because my thinking was that what facilitators in England and Wales could really benefit from was an opportunity to meet face to face. I figured that's what people are mostly lacking. And also IF globally offers a lot of virtual ways to connect. Because being global, that's, almost the only way that people can connect in that kind of global community. Since England and Wales is quite small and compact, and I thought there were not many opportunities for facilitators to get together and connect with each other professionally and personally, I thought providing face-to-face meetups would be the best place to focus. Having established those and found the value of them, it began to be clear that even though we got meetups all over the country, we're still not reaching everybody because there are still places where there is not a meetup locally. And also, so that's one of the reasons to offer the virtual meetups as well, is to reach those who don't have a meetup within reach. But the other reason as well was to try to use the virtual meetups to give people a flavor of the face-to-face ones, to encourage people to come to them. So the part of the point of the virtual meetups is to give people a chance to connect across face-to-face meetup from people around the country connecting with each other, but also to connect with people who haven't been yet in the hopes that maybe they will once they've learned a bit more about it.
And also I imagine that England and Wales, I'm likely to go to the London ones. But I'm not going to go all the way to Bristol, as much as I like Helen Jewell, who might be there.
Why not? Perhaps you should.
Because I don't like traveling. That's why I work remotely. So I suppose also, I mean, for me, it means that I can connect with other people in England and Wales without having to travel further than I would like.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's nice as well. Something else as you were talking that I was thinking. Maybe listeners, it's interesting to know, because this community of facilitators, facilitation is a very niche profession.
Yeah.
There aren't that many facilitators around. And I know that IAF, and especially the meetups, they're not only for facilitators, they're also for people who are using facilitation in other contexts.
Right.
But essentially, to find a facilitator near you with whom you can say, that went terribly, or I don't know, I've got an event, blah, blah, that is really hard. So I imagine that the meetups also cover that.
That's right. I mean, that's one of the things that people attending our meetups, both face-to-face and virtual, particularly appreciate, I think. A lot of facilitators work for themselves, they're freelance, or they have their own business, or they work in very small firms with just 2 or 3 or a handful of people. And mostly when we facilitate alone. Sometimes we co-facilitate in pairs or larger teams. But my experience is that a lot of facilitators spend a lot of their professional life on their own. And they really appreciate the chance to meet and connect with other people who actually understand what they do and what they're talking about, and who they can learn from and connect with.
So going back to the online meetups, what happens in them? Or what's been happening, or what could happen?
The online meetups have been going for about a year now, I think, maybe even not quite a year. And what we've done, mostly we've had between half a dozen and 15 or 20 at the most so far attending. And with those kind of numbers for an hour, which is how long we take, what we've done is we start with a very quick 1 or 2 minute introduction to IAF and to the meetups for the benefit of newcomers. Then there's a round of introductions, a one breath introduction to try and challenge people to introduce themselves any way they like, but only taking as long as they don't need to take a breath. So that tries to keep it quick so that everybody gets a bit of a sense of who's there and who they might want to talk with, what they might want to talk about, but without taking too long about it. And then the bulk of the time, we use the breakout group function. We use Zoom, and we use the breakout groups. We give people 2 rounds of breakout sessions in 2 different groups, each for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then a short plenary in between where one from each group shares something of what they discussed in the group. The same kind of plenary at the end, and then any closing reflections. We ask people to share contact details or anything else they'd like to share in the chat, and then we email that to everybody afterwards. So it's a very simple format, and it takes no preparation really before each meetup. And it's a very short time people have to talk with each other, which can leave people feeling a bit frustrated. But then again, part of the point of these things is to give people a chance to connect with each other so that they will want to connect with each other again.
And that's the beauty of doing them online, is that it's going to be possible, because if we've been talking online just now, there's no reason why we shouldn't do that next week if we need to.
Right. And there's no reason why we can't connect on LinkedIn or by email or any other way, on any other channel as well.
Exactly.
The conversation may continue.
Yeah. And have you seen anything change then in the co-located meetups as a result of this? Have you seen anything in the community? I mean, has there been any visible effect of having had these meetups? Is it once a month for almost a year?
Do you mean a visible effect of the virtual meetups?
Visible effect
or
in general, in how people connect. Do you think it's made a difference to the community, basically?
I'm absolutely sure it's made a difference. I mean, we have a community now in a way that we really did not 5 years ago. The community has grown enormously in the last 5 years. And often I hear stories. I mean, my guess is 95% of the impact of these meetups I have no idea about.
Yes.
but every now and again, I hear stories about how people are working together with clients, or working together to develop new products or offerings, referring work to each other, how people are collaborating in their own business, in their own practice, as a result of having met each other at meetups. So yeah, in that sense, it's certainly, I'm sure it's making a difference.
Do you think that meeting online has made a difference, or we don't know?
I'm pretty sure some people have been to face-to-face meetups after attending a virtual. I mean, I think it would be difficult to tease apart the impact of face-to-face from online, because they're all sort of part of a larger system.
Yes.
But one thing I can say is that there are some people who have only attended online and who've said clearly and often that they really appreciate the opportunity to do so, because they wouldn't attend at all otherwise.
And of course, what's really wonderful is this phrasing of it. They're open to facilitators and friends. Very open, of course, to not having to be based in England and Wales, absolutely, to join these meetups, because that means that it's broadening who's attending. So who attends, Martin?
So the people attending the virtual meetups, I would say half to 2/3 probably are people who have attended a face-to-face one, or people who subsequently do. Quite a lot of them quite a lot of the people are the same people, if you like, as attend the face-to-face. We have also had one or two regulars and less regular people join us from elsewhere in the world, from the Netherlands, from India, certainly from Scotland and Ireland, as well as England and Wales. And I suppose most of them probably do think of themselves as facilitators, or think of what they do as facilitation. But they're not all professional by any means. And certainly some of them are just curious, just interested, because they've heard of facilitation or they've experienced it and they want to find out more. And I suppose quite a few as well are people who are just starting out, or thinking about starting out a new direction in their professional life. Maybe they do a bit of facilitation in their work and they'd like to do more, or they're thinking of setting up a facilitation business, or maybe they're at a sort of a transition in their life and they're wondering what to do next and thinking of how facilitation might play a part in it. So we get quite a few people coming for those sorts of reasons, to meet others who've done it, if you like, who they can learn from that way.
Good. So if anyone listening is like, oh, this sounds interesting, I quite like to meet have some chats around facilitation in whatever context that might mean, and they think, okay, well, they sound like a nice bunch. How can they join the meetups, the virtual meetups, to start with?
Well, if they go to meetup.com and search for facilitation meetups, or search for IAF Facilitation and Friends, hopefully they'll find the meetups that way. Also, they can go to the England and Wales page of the IAF website, which is iaf-world.org. And there's links to all the meetup groups there. We have 5 regional meetup groups in England and Wales, and there's links there also to Scotland and Ireland groups. We're on all of the social media as well, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. Hopefully they can find us there. The reason we have several different meetup groups is because we wanted the groups to feel local and to be local. And especially since we started in London, and we have a lot more meetups in London as well than elsewhere, because there's a lot more people in London, and the meetups have been going longer. So we didn't want to have people from other parts of the country join the meetup group and find most of the meetups are in London, too far away and too expensive to get to, and so on. So we started regional meetup groups so that each one would be local. And then when we started the virtual meetups, we realized we were going to have to post the virtual meetups in all of the meetup groups in order that it would be available to everybody, which complicates a little bit the process of setting them up and taking RSVPs and so on. But it does mean that the virtual meetups get to belong to all of the regions in a way, as well as the face-to-face meetups.
And listeners, you can find Martin at many of the IAF England and Wales meetups, or check out his website, Martin Gilbraith, that's GILBRAITH.com. And he might well be at that meetup I was telling you about right at the beginning of the show. Remember, it's quite a long time ago, that meetup on facilitating hybrid conversations, which is happening on the 27th of February 2020 at 6 p.m. UK time. So if you're interested in joining us, check out the link in the show notes or get in touch using the contact form at virtualnotdistant.com. Well, thank you very much, listeners. Another mammoth episode. Thank you for getting to the end. And many thanks to the guests we heard from: Lisette Sutherland, Alex Hearst, Mark Kilby, and Martin Gilbraith. Next week, we'll hand over to our friends from Shield Geo for the second episode on the series Connection and Disconnection in Remote Teams. For now, that's all from me, Pilar Ortiz. A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast produced by Virtual Not Distant. If you have something to add to the conversation, let us know through the contact form over at virtualnotdistant.com. I have been your host, Pilar Ortiz, and I'm signing off now. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.